At this time, I'd like to ask Brad White to join me on stage. Brad is the Executive Director of the Department of Transportation. Brad returned to the department in July of 21 to take that role. I say return because early in your career you were there, if I remember correctly, Brad.
Doing
some work with working for Commissioner Hall at the time. But you know what? He's also had a stellar career doing a lot of things. He's been 4 different chiefs of staff, both with the Department of Audit, both with Senator Thad Cochran and Senator Hyde Smith, and most recently, before going back to MDOT, he was the chief of staff for Governor Tate Reeves. Now, you also, in that time, probably spent a little bit of time working with a guy that was just on stage when you were chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party under Governor Barber. So anyway, he's got a great deal of experience, but you know, more importantly, he's now over our state's transportation system, which is a vitally important part of the economy. Now, Brad, I believe that this is really a core function of government, in my opinion, with what the department does. Can you take a few minutes and tell us a little bit of what's going on right now and kind of what's ahead and as we think about how do we make our transportation system even that much stronger?
Well, we are the Department of Transportation, not the old highway department. So thanks to contributions from the legislature, we're making further investments to try to leverage federal dollars in all the modes of transportation, not just highways and bridges, but aeronautics, rail, public transit, water ports, etc. But within the area that we're accountable for and responsible for is our state highway system, our state bridge system. And we receive a little more than half of our budget from the federal government through the reauthorization of Federal Highway Administration, and then thanks in large part to the state fuel tax that is diverted to us for the purpose of providing the matching dollars, we're able to engage with Federal Highway Administration on about $1.5 billion budget a year.
Well, you know, and I know in the last few years we've seen a lot of, the legislature's been really taking on this as a very important issue and provided some additional funds. But in many cases, those have been one-time funding or special project fundings. So I guess my question is really kind of a 2-part question. What have we been able to accomplish as a result of that? And then going forward, what do you see as our biggest need in addressing the needs that we have in the Department of Transportation?
Well, within the Office of Highways, we operate 2 main programs. One deals with maintenance of the existing system, and one deals with the building out or adding of efficiency to that system. By a great deal of thanks to the help of Senator Roger Wicker, who was the lead Republican on the Senate Transportation Committee during the reauthorization of federal highway, Mississippi received an extra $1 billion in that reauthorization, which allowed us to start back the capacity program, which is the major construction program that we have. And then the legislature stepped up with one-time money, as you said, which allowed us to take those projects that were made shovel ready and go ahead and get them off the conveyor belt and under construction. So as a result of that, we've got about $750 million worth of major construction projects all over the state, from Tippah County, DeSoto County, down to the Gulf Coast and all points in between that we're doing. But as you mentioned, that was one-time money, and what we run is a reimbursement program of sorts. So it's not just important that we have funds to carry out our mission, but the manner in which we receive them is equally important. So our big need right now is recurring revenue that would allow that conveyor belt of projects to continue.
Well, you know, back in 2017, MEC had wrapped up its Blueprint Mississippi infrastructure study, and it was really focused on really the highway system as part of the infrastructure. And while we understand, without question, ports, rail, air is very important, and I know there's been some things, particularly on multimodal, that's happening on that front. But even then, when we looked at those, we knew that we had an issue as it related to what we would need. Back then, we said just to kind of get us up to speed and get us keeping pace, we needed at least another $300 million additional dollars that was dedicated just to MDOT. I know that since that time, we've seen a little bit of increase with lottery funds and some other special funds that are actually dedicated to the department. But I also know during that time that y'all have not been immune to inflation just like everybody else. The difference, though, is when it comes to construction, in particular highway construction, that inflation runs at a much faster, higher pace than what you typically see from a consumer perspective as it relates to inflation. So I guess as we think about additional funding and cost increases and the pressures that you're facing, what are we really going to need to not only just maintain this, what I consider probably the state's largest investment that exists, but also expand capacity in the places where we really need to expand capacity?
In an ideal world today, and you're right, we've not been immune to inflation. Cost of goods go up, materials, cost of labor, equipment. We're running probably about a $485 million deficit in the maintenance program. When you talk about the investment the taxpayers have in highways and bridges, that's an asset that's valued at over $66 billion. It's about 33,000 miles of highway, over 5,000 bridges. So to maintain them, we are falling behind. We're very grateful for the lottery. That generates $80 million a year. They also gave us fees on electric and hybrid vehicles that are now generating somewhere about $1.5 million a year. While that's good, and while it's been put to good use, 100% of that goes directly to projects. That still obviously leaves us falling short from what we need to carry on just in the maintenance of our system. When you look at the capacity program, you're talking about these big $200-300 million projects. We would probably need in excess of another $100 million a year just to devote to that program to keep everything moving in the manner in which you would want. But again, the problem with one-time money is you've got to remember that we have as partners in delivering this product to the taxpayer all of the contractors and consultants around the state that work with us to do that. Well, the contractor is not going to go take a $2 million loan out on a crane that he's got to pay off in 6 years if he can't project into the future and know that we're going to have the revenue to keep work coming so that they can pay employees, pay off equipment, do all the things necessary to be built up to carry that. But that's a long way around the barn and telling you that our deficit now is around $485 million a year in maintenance, about $100 million a year in capacity.
Well, when you think about what we've been able to accomplish, and we have accomplished some really good stuff. I know the ERBR program, the Emergency Road and Bridge Program, has really helped at the local level. I know that we're trying to leverage the dollars on multimodal, and we had a meeting earlier, I guess late last week, that 30 turned into about $100 million just by able to leverage federal dollars to help us do that. You mentioned, but we still have other needs. So you mentioned this earlier about the funding streams, but you talk a lot about sustainable funding, and that means increasing funds in a way that we know they're going to be there for that contractor to be able to buy that crane or be able to buy the equipment. So talk a little bit about your ideas as it relates to how do we create a stronger, sustainable fund approach to meeting some of those gaps that you just talked about?
Well, I'll leave ultimately that obviously to the policymakers, but my observation has been that for all these years, we've put all of our eggs in the basket of the fuel tax. And 1 cent of fuel tax generates about $23 or $24 million a year annually. So when you're looking at the needs that we have, I personally don't think that even if we were in favor of raising the fuel tax, that you could raise it enough to where the taxpayers could handle it and still take care of the needs of their transportation system. So I think that the answer is going to be found in doing what other states have done, and that's looking for a more diversified approach in providing dedicated streams of revenue, whether that's using funds that are collected through use tax, through gaming revenue, through other streams that can be dedicated to the Department of Transportation for the maintenance of our system and construction, because I think collectively we can pool together enough money to help make the difference. And this is why this is important. MDOT's a state agency, but we're a state agency that operates a federal program, and we have federal requirements. We're required to maintain our system, our existing system, to a certain level. And if we start falling behind in that, then all the federal money, which is more than half our budget, can be called into question or potentially kept from us. So there was a point, and I'll give you where this is applicable. About 12 years ago, the commission at the time was faced with this revenue issue, and they had to make the decision to put a moratorium of sorts on the capacity construction program in order to divert all funds available to maintenance. Now, what that did was the program that's designed to make our system efficient and continue building it out, turning 2 lanes into 4 lanes or 4 lanes into 6 lanes, et cetera, that program was stalled. And so that's why you have traffic problems in Gluckstadt and Madison or 55 on DeSoto County or areas on the coast, is because we didn't address the funding needs we had, and the program designed to keep building our system out was inactive. And so this is one of those issues that sooner or later we're going to have to address in one way or another.
Well, if you can figure out a way to make my commute to Gluckstadt a little bit shorter, I'd greatly appreciate that. But nevertheless,
Add lanes and an interchange. All it takes is money.
So we're working on it. I know there's been a lot of good things that has happened. I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to talk with us today.
Thank you.
I want you to understand MEC has been very much involved in seeing this as a major priority issue. It's one of our 5 major goals in our Securing Mississippi's Future program. We look forward to continuing to work with you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the help. And we do have a pro-transportation leadership in our state, from the governor, our legislature, our congressional delegation, and we look forward to continue working with all of our partners to do that.
Thank you for being with us, Brad.